All About Writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 43, part 8 on our series. Wait a second. Hold on. I'm having a moment. I feel like I have to start over. Huh? Because I say this is episode, I somehow my thing is, this is episode 43, part 8 on a series of business writing, and then I go into who I am. But what I was reading was backwards. I think I had the old thing where I'm Ben, and I was rereading the wrong thing. Okay.
I'm Sara, but you then say who I am.
Yes. Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode. Oh, I can't do this. Oh my gosh, I do the episode and then I introduce myself. Right? No.
Yes, yeah. You say the episode first, and once you say that, then you say, I'm Sara.
It feels so weird. It feels so weird. I don't know why. Something's like, I'm like overthinking this. Get in your head. Get in your head. I know it's been a long day. I'm awake. I have been awake since 6 a.m. Okay. Oh my God. I'm not even drinking. Oh, I wish I was drinking. Okay. Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 43, part 8 on our series on the business of writing. I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher.
And I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter. And today, we're talking about subtitles. This is a question that comes up quite a lot, with authors wondering, do I need subtitles? What's required? And we're going to sort of dive into more of the publishing side today about what the industry wants and what different genres of writing want regarding subtitles.
Which is really going to be interesting for me because I never think of subtitles off the bat. And I know a lot of people think about subtitles almost to the point where they become, very long and they become super wordy. And I've seen it both ways. And I always think of subtitles in the terms of, well, it's a subtitle because it's calling out your series. But I know some people use subtitles as part of their like an add-on to their title. And as a publisher with your background, Ben, I'm really interested to hear like what you think of them as a whole. Are they needed? When are they needed? When do they add to the whole book or series? And when are they just superfluous?
Yeah. So it's really a difference between fiction and nonfiction is what I find. Let's talk about fiction first, as we're both fiction authors. And in general, I would say that fiction books don't need subtitles. The place where I see it most often is with a series. If the series name is based on the first book, like Game of Thrones, for example. Game of Thrones is the name of the first novel, and it's actually called the Fire and Ice Saga or something.
It's the Song of Ice and Fire.
That's it. That's it. The song. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the name of the series. But the name Game of Thrones was such a great name that everybody just kind of referred to it. Even before the TV show came along and took the name, everybody just talked about the Game of Thrones series, even though the books all had different names. So that's an example of where if the first book is really breakout or has a really distinctive title, the rest of the series might take its name from that. And then you might get, it didn't happen in this case, but it would be like Game of Thrones Book 2, blah, 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 and give you the thing. And so sometimes with a fiction book, you will get subtitles which are effectively half titles in that you're sort of taking the name of the series and then putting the title behind it, but in a sense it becomes a subtitle. So that's the most common way that I see it with fiction books. Like, for example, Sarah, if you want to make your books all called Flats Junction and then, colon, Outcast, that would be a way that it would sort of become a subtitle. And when your series is a famous TV show, they call it Flats Junction, then they might get repurposed all that way, and that's how they would come across. But in general, I don't recommend subtitles for fiction. I think that fiction books should have their own title. They might be part of a series, but the series should go, beneath it. Like with mine, the Blackwood and Virtue series. The series is called Blackwood and Virtue,
Yeah.
but it isn't Blackwood and Virtue, like Light in the Abyss. It's Light in the Abyss, Blackwood and Virtue down below. So that's how I think it should work for fiction books. There's always exceptions, but in general, I think that makes sense.
So, and it's really interesting. I'm glad you're saying this because I always think of, and you're pointing out my books, which I'll use as an example because they are part of a series. But you know, you you always have book one or Flats Junction very much smaller than the book title. And I think in a way I always thought of those smaller headings as the link, the subtitle was the link between the series so that everybody knew that they belonged to a series through
Sorry.
Gesundheit
Good.
through the subtitles. The quote unquote subtitle of each book, of each novel, even though they had a bigger title, they still had like a subtitle that linked them together. But you're saying that's not even truly a subtitle in the traditional sense.
Well, it is a link, like you said, and you can make a subtitle whatever you want it to be. That is, yeah. If you sort of make the series the subtitle, sure, that could work too. My point is that I think that the fiction novels really should have their own title themselves, and they don't really need subtitles. Uh, a title is like the cover. Its job is to grab the attention of the reader. And for that, you generally need a small number of words. So, you want to try and keep it down to 3 or 4 words if you can. Um, my first series, actually, the publisher decided to try and go with naming the series after the first book. So the first book is called Virtues of War. The second book, technically, is called Virtues of War, Ghosts of War. And the third book is called Virtues of War, March of War, which I don't like personally at all because the titles are so similar. Virtues of War, Ghosts of War, March of War. It's kind of a theme I was
Yeah,
working
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And they just made it repeat over and over again. And so people would go looking for March of War, and well, it's not there because it's called Virtues of War, March of War. And if you go to Amazon or Goodreads or my own website, they're all different things. And it can make it confusing. So, I know what my publisher was doing because I guess they thought, oh, Virtues of War, that's a really punchy title. Let's just lean into that and make the whole series named after that. But because the second and third titles were so similar, because they were a theme, I'm not sure how well it landed. So, anyway, maybe that's why I want to stay away from
Okay,
them.
but like then let's shift gears then, and maybe can you give very concrete examples to our listeners about a what is a subtitle, especially in nonfiction? Like when I'm saying what's a subtitle, give me a definition and some examples, like especially
Yeah.
in
Okay.
nonfiction.
Now,
What is that?
nonfiction is a totally different story, and I'll get to that in just a sec. But I thought of one good example of fiction. I don't know if you remember Tom Clancy's Op Center.
I
It's
mean, I know
probably
Tom
from when
Clancy.
you were in elementary school. I know, but um, Tom Clancy's Op Center was a series, and there'd always be another little name of each individual book at the bottom.
Okay.
So in a sense, Tom Clancy's Op Center was the title, and then there was a little subtitle at the bottom, which actually told you what each book was.
Okay.
Mostly because they were selling the brand of Tom Clancy, because at the time he was one of the biggest authors in the world. So this is Tom Clancy's Op Center, and that grabs people's attention. And oh, it's this particular book, whatever. It's just Tom Clancy's Op Center. So there's an example of where in fiction a title subtitle could work. Right. So um, Nonfiction. Nonfiction is totally different. Nonfiction subtitles are actually really effective because in nonfiction you often have a complex idea that you're trying to get across. Your book is about something deep and profound, which is actually very hard to summarize in one or two words. So in nonfiction, very often your title will be something really snappy and short. There was a trend for a while for one word, like blink. That was the title, right? And then you'd have like a 10-word subtitle underneath that
Yeah.
explaining what the book was actually about. And that's very common. It is very effective because the snappy one or two word title gets your attention. Oh, what's that? And then you read the subtitle. Oh, it's about this complex, nuanced topic that I am interested in. And because it's a very long subtitle, it suggests that the book is not just, shallow and flashy, like the title suggests. It actually, no, there's intelligence and thought in this book. So, from a nonfiction point of view, subtitles are very effective and they are often quite long. Like, I have seen subtitles like 20 words long if they're just going on explaining what they're talking about here. So, yeah,
So the subtitles essentially are a tool that help you market your book,
they
especially
are. Yeah.
fiction.
Yeah, and it's great for nonfiction because nonfiction is generally for people who want to learn something and they generally want to know that the book that they're going to read is a deep, profound, thoughtful examination of this topic. So you need the big one word, or maybe two to get their attention, but then you have to explain what this is about. So yeah. So so it is very different between fiction and nonfiction. Fiction, I generally recommend stay away from subtitles. You don't need them. But for nonfiction, you pretty much always need them because exactly that reason.
That makes sense. And I
Yeah,
mean, as someone who's published nonfiction, there's a subtitle with my book, even though the
that's good.
title itself actually speaks to the book and what it covers. There's still a subtitle, and I remember going back and forth with HarperCollins about, what the title should be, what the subtitle should be, which version of the two, and meshing them together to make it make sense but still be flashy and catchy and interesting. And um and it was never even a question. There was always gonna be a subtitle for that nonfiction book. And I think you're right. I think it's there to explain, but, like, I think of it as it's a marketing tool on your cover.
Yep,
And,
absolutely.
um, and yet it wouldn't make sense on fiction. I mean, if let's pull out the most biggest, one of the biggest genres out there. Let's pull out, romance. I mean, how would you ever use a subtitle appropriately on a romance cover, or even like a thriller cover? Like there's not a way to do it well without giving the gist away or without going getting too wordy and ruining your cover. I mean, it's it is something that I think, I've seen people attempt to do some version of a subtitle, like at writers conferences when they're early on in their career and they are just kind of throwing everything at the wall and trying to figure out what makes sense for their title and their blurbs and everything else. And it never really goes anywhere, but people attempt it, and it just doesn't work
Hmm.
in specific genres, especially hyper specific genres. But I guess what I want to leave people who are listening with is that it doesn't mean it can never be done. It's just it's quite genre specific. And even if, like, you submit something to a publisher which is, in some sort of genre that has a subtitle, there's a chance your publisher is going to be like, no, because this doesn't fit within the kind of the cookie cutter of this genre, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Publishers will definitely want to say in the title. I know one of my books, they changed the title because it was that phrase had been used too many times with other
mm,
books, famous movies, and it was just, they felt it would get lost when people searched for it. Fair enough. They know best. Um, so, yeah, publishers want to because their business is selling the book and marketing the book. And the title is a huge part of that. It's what gets people's attention. And
Yeah.
you're right about the difference between fiction and nonfiction with it doesn't work because a lot of the appeal of a fiction book is sort of that intrigue and that, ooh, how interesting. Like you want to grab your reader to go, what's that? I wonder, I want to know more, right? Especially with romance or thriller, right? There's a lot of mystique. So having a really snappy title which hints but doesn't give away anything is exactly what you want for that kind of book. Whereas for nonfiction, no, you actually want to tell them, this is what I'm talking about. It's a different audience, and it may be the same actual person, but they're in a mood for something different. So I want to be intrigued and tantalized, or I want to be informed. And the difference between a subtitle or not really makes a difference there.
I want to kind of dovetail a little bit on this though, because like I've seen genre fiction where the title is there, maybe it's part of a series, but then there's these like tantalizing phrases on the cover that are sort of like subtitles, but
Hmm.
in reality serve as like little half sentence teasers
Hmm.
to what's going to happen in the book. Those, just to like maybe say this to anyone who doesn't know, those aren't actually subtitles, correct? I mean,
Correct.
what would we call that in in the advertising cover world of publishing? They're not subtitles, they're not blurbs. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like seeing a romance cover and it has a title, maybe it has book 3 of this series, right? And then it'll be like, some catchphrase like like he's her employer, but she, hates rich men. I don't know. I'm coming up. I'm doing a terrible job. But like that's not a subtitle. It's
No,
not
no.
it's not a blurb, it's not anything. What would we call that?
Hmm. I'd call it cover art. It's part of the cover, you know. Yeah. I mean, often the back of the book will have a little thing like that
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. I just want to be clear with people because sometimes I think people might go, but isn't that
Yeah, it's not, and I'll tell you why. Because when you look up the Library of Congress listing, it will just say the title and the subtitle. It won't say he was her employer, but she hated rich men. That would not be in the Library of Congress listing for it, right? That is that's yeah, it's marketing. It's part of the cover design. So
okay?
great
That's
point though. Yeah,
I'm just saying in case we're not being clear enough on what constitutes a subtitle, like those types of verbiage, words on the cover
that's right.
are not
That's
sub.
right. Yeah, reviews on the cover, the list of awards the author is won, those are not anything to do with the
Of course.
subtitle.
Right.
The subtitle
Right.
is something that is attached to the identity of the book.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Good
Okay.
point. Cool.
I just wanted to check before we wrap up on this very specific topic. Those kinds of phrases are not also not subtitles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cleared that up. Okay. Good. That's all I've got. Anything else that I've forgotten to ask you, Ben, as a publisher?
Nope. No,
All
I think
right.
as subtitles, fiction, don't do it. Nonfiction, do it. I think I'll leave it at that.
There you
Those are
go.
pretty good ones.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you very much for your insider point of view as a publisher and someone who looks at cover design way more than I ever do. And that's our show for today, everyone. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our chats. Feel free to leave a review, which really, really does help us a lot. We love to read them. And if anyone is looking for getting their book ready for the world or deciding if they need a subtitle or not, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services, and you can find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com, as well as you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com and Facebook and Instagram.
You can catch up with Sarah at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.